We're going to transition now from the tridimensional leadership model into what's known as the DISC, DISC, for personality temperament, and the emotional intelligence or awareness management skills that are being observed by the followers with regard to the leader. Before we finish with the tridimensional effectiveness model, we need to look more closely at the leader's personality temperament and the leader's emotional IQ, his or her ability to be self-aware, socially aware, self-management, and social skills. We've looked at the least preferred coworker scale, and these were the observations about the leader's effectiveness and ineffectiveness from the point of view of the followers, that person's subordinates, his or her peers, and the supervisors. We characterize these leadership effectiveness in three key areas: their relationship to their followers, the power base that they have, and the structure of the work being performed. We used verbs to describe our observations using the Fred Fielder's theory of effective leadership. We now turn our attention to the leader's styles, based upon his or her behavior traits. These are defined as in four different areas, and it's called DISC, D-I-S-C, personality traits. This particular process has been validated since 1982 with Silva Kaplan and his associates, where they took the DISC, personality characteristics, and measured them against 5 separate instruments that were administered by the research group. Now, you may be familiar with these, and these are the Welsh-Alder Intelligence Scales, Wace, Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, Cattell's 16-point, Minnesota's Multifaceted Personality Inventory, and the Strong-Campbell Interest Inventory. Kaplan correlated all of these findings and found out that they significantly coincide or follow the personality characteristic tools that we see on this slide. The DISC is an acronym that stands for 4 main personality profiles described in the model. And here again we have another model. The first one being dominance, and in the dominance personality trait, the person desires being in charge and setting their own standards of achievement. You probably already know somebody like that. The influence, which is the I, the person desires a friendly environment and the freedom and flexibility to make changes along the way. The S stands for steadfastness, and this particular person works at being supportive and carrying out expectations of others. And then finally, the last one was conscientiousness, and sometimes called compliance. And this particular personal trait desires being right, fulfilling commitments, and having control over quality. We will recognize these and using them as a reliable personality profile tool so that we can understand the leader's actions and the traits. I want to give you a word of caution here, and I'll read this to you because this is out of a book called from Ken Vogue's Understanding How Others Misunderstand You. And in here he says, a personality trait description should not be used to typecast or label others, or conversely to excuse ourselves for negative behavior. If a label helps to clarify the differences, then it's useful. But if it is used to create barriers to communication it is confining. So our intent is to clarify rather than confine. So here are, again, the behavior expectations. The high Ds, which are for dominant, have realistic expectations as they apply to themselves. But they can impose higher standards on others in order to maintain control. The high Is, which is for the influencer, has relatively low expectations of themselves and others. The steadfastness person on the S's are committed to doing things correctly, but do not necessarily expect others to comply with their high standards. And then finally, the compliant person expects perfection for both themselves and others. So basically, the DISC leadership can be categorized in these definitions. The dominant style desires to control the environment. The interactive or influences focuses on other people and building relationships. The steadfastness style values loyalty and cooperating with others. And then finally, the cautious and compliant style is compelled to do the things the right way. Now, as we get into the details of this, understand that this is a continuum. It is not where you are completely a D type or an I type, but it may be a combination of any of these. So in doing that, you see the DISC traits are categorized in a what's called a continuum, meaning high to low. And this details a series of over 120 different traits in 4 different scales to identify specifically the probability or the expectations of the individuals that contain these traits. Now, I want to let you know that each of us have some of this, every one of these in us. They may be high, and high meaning they will influence your behavior more readily than a low one. And the low one means that it is not a dominant trait, but it still has a trait in there. And understanding your traits will lead you to be able to be a better leader and also be able to understand the motivations and desires of the folks you're leading. So the high D traits direct domineering risk takers. That's a type of characteristic of a particular high D dominant person. A low D person traits are unassuming and mild and modest. The high influencing trait is persuasive and social and confident. A low I trait is controlled, retiring, and aloof. They maintain their posture where they don't express themselves. The high S, which is going to be the steadfastness traits, is that they're patient, they're loyal, and they're a team person. In a low S, less dominant trait of steadfastness, you'll find that the person will be mobile, they'll be spontaneous, and they'll be active. And finally, in the compliance trait, a high C trait, personality traits would mean that particular person is accurate, they are detailed in their purposes, and they were restrained. But a low C, on the other hand, is a person that kind of considers I'm my own person. They're firm and they deny it. So what does this mean in understanding your basic styles? Well, here we have a chart that talks about the high types of the individual DISC traits, and then one that has a low type on the bottom. So it talks about the act, what they want, what they fear, and what they respond. Now remember, we looked at our leaders in the last sessions on their behavior. So here again, these are verbs that shows you the types of reactions or the types of activities that a particular person would distribute if you're observing their behavior. And as an example, on a high D, that particular person would be persuasive. What they want is they want to be in control. They fear losing control, and in response to losing that, they get angry. An influential person, on the other hand, on the high I, they are persuasive. They want approval from others because they seek the relationship. They fear being rejected off of those relationships, and in response, they blame other people or themselves. In the high S personality, which is your steadfastness, this particular person generally acts very patiently. They like or want routine. They don't like change. They fear change. And in response to their fears, they are non-participant. Finally, on the high C, these particular persons, and this is the compliant one, is they're contemplative. They're thinking about what needs to be done. They want standards above everything else. They fear being wrong and missing the standards, and in response, they begin to criticize. Now, in the low side of this, the acts of a particular dominant person is that they will be cooperative. They will seek to be harmonious. They want to think everybody get along. When that doesn't happen, they get confrontational. And then in response to that, they may be indifferent to what's going on in whatever environment it is. Likewise, when you have the influential person as a low indicator, they become unemotional. They want logic, understanding what's going on, and in their own mind eye that things need to be done in a particular way. They fear illogical acts, and so sometimes change is very upsetting to them. And when this happens, they're very suspicious on other people's motives. Finally, overall, on the steadfastness, on a low S, they act responsive in opposite of being patient. They want variety rather than routine. They like the status quo. They don't want to change. And in response, they may be physical. They get frustrated and will act out. Finally, in the compliant low standard, you'll find that they might be a free spirit instead of being contemplative. They're all over the place. They want non-structured. They are not wanting to buckle down and do the standards. They fear conforming. They don't want to see everybody marching along to the same drum. And in response, they become very emotional.